I was recently at Disneyland for vacation, and I have to say, they charge you for everything in California. Like plastic bags, 10 cents. What about like a water bottle? They charge you an extra 10 cents. I'm surprised they didn't charge me for every wipe that I took there while at California. They're probably going to charge me later, like send me a bill for wiping my ass. Every single wipe, an extra 10 cents or something crazy like that. Look, I'm from Arizona. I'm not used to like the extra taxes and things of that nature, but yeah, pretty intense, pretty crazy stuff. I guess it kind of makes sense. People are willing to pay the extra taxes because it is like a place that people want to go visit. Whereas in here in Arizona, I don't think anybody's planning vacations here unless people like have families here. Anyways, I'm getting off track here. I'm rambling. Let's get straight into today's video. I wanted to talk about two of the newer announcements from Hasbro, and they're pretty interesting. I'm not going to say they're perfect. I'm not going to say they're great, but they're also not necessarily as bad as I think people are making both of these figures seem. On the surface, I mean, you're getting a new X-Factor figure. Great. They're trying to complete the X-Force wave as much as they possibly can. We did get that Deadpool like ages ago. I think we got a Domino in that X-Force outfit. We might have gotten a Wolverine. I'm trying to remember if we got a Wolverine for the X-Force. But more recently, we got the X-23 and the Warpath 2-pack announced, which I've already given my thoughts on it. I think it's buffoonery, you know, pins everywhere. It's kind of an ugly 2-pack. But now we're getting an Archangel, and I believe, what was it? We're getting a Nightcrawler in the foreseeable future. I think that went up for pre-order as well. So they're trying to complete as many, or trying to throw as many X-Force characters as they possibly can, trying to rush through it and complete that team, which is, you know, a really nice touch from Hasbro. It's not something that they usually do, but it's really cool. They're trying to complete it out. There's people that have been waiting for that team, and most people have been probably buying customs online or customizing their own action figures just to fit in that team. So it's nice. I will say with the Daredevil, it's also a really nice touch from Hasbro, because usually when it comes to live action Marvel products or projects, usually it takes like a really long period of time. Like if you guys remember when Endgame and Infinity War was coming out, we didn't actually have the action figures for those movies, and if we did, they were like not even close to accurate. I'm going to assume, and I think most people have already pointed this out, it has a lot to do with the fact that the studio either changes some stuff in, like on the cutting room floor, they make some edits last second, and also they don't want anything to be spoiled by products, so they usually don't, give them all the information up front. It's pretty interesting, but we are getting a new Daredevil Born Again from the newest Disney Plus series, which, I might do a review for it later. I'm actually genuinely enjoying this, and this is coming from somebody that's a diehard fan of that Netflix universe. Whether it was Daredevil, I absolutely loved Punisher. The Defenders was okay, and so was Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. But I was just a diehard fan of Daredevil and Punisher for the Netflix universe. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself here. What did I think about the figures? I will say, on the surface, these are two great reveals, but then you take a closer look and I'm a little bit disappointed, specifically with that Daredevil figure. I don't know what to think. I guess it kind of appears like they're trying to not cut up the body mold as much. They're trying to go more for aesthetically pleasing more so than articulation. Yeah, it is coming with like that double jointed elbows, double jointed knees. We don't know how that neck articulation is going to be. Is it just a ball joint, or is it a hinge in a ball joint? But it doesn't appear that there's any butterfly joints. It's just like a tiny little cut where the butterfly joints should be. So I'm not sure if that's considered a butterfly joint. That's not what I consider a butterfly joint. But regardless, it's there. It's a little cut. You can kind of, imagine the arms coming forward and backwards a little bit. We don't know how much of a cut there is on the back side of the figure. So that's going to be interesting. Another big thing, and I'm just going off of the promotional images for Hasbro Pulse, they don't have a hinge on this figure. It's just that kind of like, what is it, like a rotating or a floating ball joint or something like that. That's it. You're not getting the hinge, which is really interesting. I think a lot of people have gravitated towards the idea of Hasbro and McFarlane as a whole moving away from hinges. I don't think McFarlane has ever really used hinges for their mid ab articulation, but this is kind of interesting. I think people will be on both sides of this. I'm all for articulation. I'm all for natural movement. and dynamic poses. So I would much rather break up the mold a little bit more just for the sake of that. And you can definitely see it here. There's like no toe articulation. I would love to see that double ab articulation as well as butterfly joints. I'm okay with that section, like that upper torso where the arms are connected, even if it's like butterfly joints that cut really deep into the body mold. I'm okay with that because that usually means the arms can move forward extremely well and backwards extremely well. Now, I know this is more realistic, like the body mold is supposed to be closer to what you see on the live screen adaptation rather than, what you usually get with comic books where, the limbs are a little bit disproportionate or, it's based on comic book art. And so that you can usually take some liberties, maybe make the limbs a little slimmer or make the body mold a little bit slimmer just to fit the aesthetics of the comic book and to make it better in terms of articulation. But that's not, I don't think that's necessarily a must when it comes down to action figures. And that's a really big issue here. I think it's going to lack a ton of articulation. It's going to be very frustrating for people that want to get this figure into crazy poses. And as I said, I know they're going for realism, but they're action figures at the same time. So how much realism do you want? And I also want consistency from Hasbro. Why is it that sometimes you'll get action figures that are supposed to be really articulated, like a Daredevil, like a Spider-Man, but then that same character, maybe if it's like a live action adaptation, they decide to not include as much articulation or they don't add enough articulation points in certain areas? I'm just really baffled here. Regardless, it does come with 4 hands total, a rope accessory, as well as 2 batons. And I know a lot of people have complained about the head sculpt. A lot of people complain about the hands. I will say that's not really a deal breaker for me per se, because I think the rope accessory might either be new or it's reused from that comic book accurate Daredevil, but at least it makes sense to an extent, right? Like, I don't think any of these accessories are out of place. I know a lot of people have mentioned like an unmasked head sculpt for Matt Murdock, and I think in like what was it, like the first episode, within like the first few minutes, he is shown without a head, without his mask on, with a different, so it would make sense for him to have an extra head sculpt. So I'm not sure exactly what Hasbro is thinking there. I'm sure they're probably saving it for a release later down the line. We'll see. Or they just didn't know what was going to happen in the show. That's probably a very real world possibility, that they didn't know exactly. They haven't watched any of the episodes. This figure is probably already in production somewhere overseas, so it just doesn't make sense for them to go back and, hey, let's add a headpiece for an extra whatever to, that's probably going to charge them. It's probably going to cost them too much to go back into production just for a head sculpt. So I completely understand why it didn't come with that extra piece. But I think this is a good pickup if you're interested. Personally, I love the show, but I'm not going to jump into this figure. I just don't like the articulation scheme. I don't like the fact that they're sacrificing articulation for the sake of having really good sculpt work all around. But that's neither here nor there. I think it's a matter of personal perspective. I think this figure could have been so much more. Unfortunately for me, it's just falling short. Now, I will say the figure is sold out through multiple different websites. I checked Hasbro Pulse. It's completely sold out. I think a lot of people are just going to use this as like their just Netflix Daredevil in general, whether it's Netflix or the Disney Plus show. Like, they're just going to use it as like that version of Matt Murdock, the live action Matt Murdock, which I think is pretty cool. So if you guys are interested, you guys are probably gonna have to just be patient and just watch those windows or those pages, bookmark them, make sure you check them pretty consistently to see if they go back in stock. Obviously, we are getting a new Archangel. Everybody wants to talk about that $40 price point. I will say, it is what it is. I'm just used to it. Hasbro is always going to mark up stuff here and there. Every time I look at a HasLab, I'm like, it's kind of on point. Like, it's usually marked up by like $30-$40 if it's an action figure. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes you will get some great value, but sometimes it'll be a figure that I think is like marked up by $5, which is the case here. They're marking it up by another $5. So I'm not sure what to think here. It's not really a character that I'm too interested in, but I can see the appeal. I can definitely see why people would want this. I love the extra head sculpt that it comes with. I love how the wings display. I love the little accessory pieces that it comes with. Like I said, that head sculpt is just phenomenal. You can either have, a calm, serene pose or something that's like, mid-flight with some sort of like battle scream. I love it. However, I will say in terms of articulation, in terms of, the scheme for the figure, it's the same problem that I have with the Daredevil. I don't understand why it is that they're scaling back or, taking away articulation. This would have been a perfect opportunity because it doesn't really appear to be too much of a suit. It's more of just like a skin tight suit. It would make sense to have better articulation, but no butterfly joints, just a single hinge at the mid torso. I don't understand that. I'm not sure exactly what Hasbro's going with here. And it's not like with a Daredevil where they wanted to maybe sacrifice articulation for the sake of, better sculpt work all around for the body mold. So I'm just baffled at this one. This is another one that, as I said, it's not really, I'm not really trying to complete the X Factor team. So it's not really something that I need in my display. But I feel bad for people that desperately need this figure, that just want him for the sake of completing the team, because I don't feel like it's a great figure. It's really good. The wings, have hinges on them. They seem to articulate pretty well. I love the headpiece, the extra head sculpt, but it just isn't there for me. I think if for some reason they continue to scale back on features that I don't think that they should be, or I don't feel like that it's necessary for them to do that. I don't understand. They already have the newer body molds. They have the newer tech, the newer technology. And I just feel like sometimes they scale back just for absolutely no reason. On a side note, I did see a lot of people comparing the Marvel Select version to the Marvel Legends version and stating that, Hasbro was kind of doing wrong by the community because Marvel Select was doing so much better with, in terms of scaling. It was a bigger figure and it just had more detail and it was much more affordable. I will say, I've said this before and I've gone on the record, I'm not a huge Marvel Select fan. The articulation points just aren't there for me. If you're somebody that likes to just have your action figures in an upright pose, and you don't really care about dynamic posing and things of that nature, I guess Marvel Select would be a perfect avenue for you. But I just have to have articulation, and Marvel Select just doesn't have that at all. Sometimes they're very lacking in accessories and things of that nature. I guess it just depends on the figure that you're looking at. And I know there are a lot of people out there that excuse Select because of some sort of contractual obligation where they can't add enough articulation points or they can't release enough Marvel Select action figures in general. But I completely disagree with that. I think Diamond Select just does it well. I wouldn't say I disagree with it, but I don't think that's the main reason why their action figures don't articulate well. I think a lot of it has to do with just the technology that they use and the body mold and just how they put no emphasis into articulation points. So it's just a matter of personal perspective. I think that they're adequately priced in terms of the engineer work that they put into them. They save money on the back end because they don't add enough articulation to their figures. And so if that's your cup of tea, buy it. I don't understand why they're comparing Marvel Legends to Marvel Select. It just makes no sense to me. It's like comparing apples and oranges. At the end of the day, if you collect Marvel Select action figures, then collect them. It's, why try to compare the both lines when they have different objectives in mind at the end of the day? I do feel like the figure is overpriced by maybe like $5. But as I said earlier, if you collect Marvel Legends in general, this really shouldn't come as too much of a shock or a surprise. That's just what you should be used to paying. There's a little bit of a markup here and there with Marvel Legends or just Hasbro in general. But as always, this is just my personal opinion, my personal thoughts. I wanted to give you guys my personal take on both of these releases because they're kind of interesting. It's a good thing that we're getting both figures, but then simultaneously I don't like the engineering. I don't like the effort that's being placed into both of these figures. It's a little bit frustrating. But as I said, very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. Did you guys pick up either one of these figures? Do you plan on picking them up? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of rambling content, make sure to stay tuned. We do this pretty consistently. I would say at least 4 to 5 times on a weekly basis. And, as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. Play with your action figures, pose them, photograph them, whatever it is that you're into. Just enjoy them. I think sometimes we forget to do that, and that's the most important part of the hobby. Stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.